"Dad, I have a surprise for you," she said, just like she used to when she was a little girl hiding a broken vase behind her back. But this time the stakes were much higher. Olivia stood in the kitchen doorway, her hands behind her back, rocking on her heels the way she did when she was nervous. I looked up from my coffee, expecting a joke, maybe a silly drawing from my grandson, or a photo from her phone. Instead, she produced a thick white envelope and set it on the table in front of me. Her smile was too wide, her eyes too bright. I felt a chill run through me, the kind you get when you realize you're about to hear something you can't unhear. "Go on. Open it," she said, her voice trembling just enough to make me pause. I glanced at her, then at the envelope. It was heavy, official looking, my name typed neatly on the front. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out a stack of papers. The first page was a letter from a law firm I'd never heard of. The second was a bill. My eyes scanned the numbers, and my heart stuttered. 595,000. I blinked, thinking I must have read it wrong. But the number didn't change. Hit subscribe right now, so you don't miss what happens next. And tell me in the comments, what's the biggest surprise your family has ever given you? "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Olivia's smile faltered, and she looked down at her hands. It's a debt, Dad, it's in your name. It has to be paid by Friday." Before I could process that, Ethan, her husband, appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, his face set in a mask of cold determination. "It's all there, Dad," he said, his tone flat. "You need to pay for it now." I stared at them, the room spinning slightly. "This must be a mistake," I said, my voice cracking. "I don't owe anyone this kind of money." Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "We found the paperwork in your office. It's all in your name. The creditors are calling every day. They said if it's not paid by Friday, they'll take the house. Our house. The kids' college funds, everything." I looked at her, searching her face for any sign that this was a joke, some elaborate prank. But there was only fear and desperation. "I didn't do this," I said, my voice shaking. "Someone must have stolen my identity." Ethan snorted. "That's convenient. But the signatures are all yours. The handwriting matches, the social security number, the mother's maiden name, everything." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "Let me see the documents," I said, reaching for the stack. I spent the next 10 minutes flipping through page after page of debt, each one more damning than the last. The signatures did look like mine. The addresses, the phone numbers, even the little quirks in my handwriting were all there. But I knew, deep down, that I hadn't signed a single one. "This is impossible," I muttered. "I would remember." Olivia sat down across from me, her hands folded in her lap. "We just want to help, Dad, but you have to be honest with us. If you don't pay, the creditors will come after all of us." I looked at her, my mind racing. How could this have happened? Who would do something like this? I thought back to the last few months. Strange phone calls, letters from banks I didn't recognize, a feeling of unease I couldn't quite shake. Has someone really stolen my identity? Or was there something else going on? I glanced at Ethan, who was watching me with a mixture of suspicion and contempt. "Why are you so sure it's me?" I asked. "Why would I hide something like this from my own family?" He shrugged. "People do strange things when they're desperate. Maybe he thought you could fix it before he found out." I shook my head, feeling a wave of anger rising in my chest. "I'm not desperate. I'm not a liar. And I'm not paying for something I didn't do." Olivia's eyes widened, and she reached across the cable, her voice trembling. "Please, Dad, we're begging you. If you don't pay, we'll lose everything. Ethan's business is on the line. The kids' college funds. Our home?" I stared at her, my heart breaking. How did it come to this? My own daughter, pleading with me to take responsibility for a debt I'd never incurred. I stood up, pushing my chair back so hard it scraped against the tile. "I need some air," I said, grabbing my coat and heading for the door. As I stepped outside, the cool morning air hit me like a flap. I walked down the driveway, my mind racing. Was I losing my mind? Had I really done something so reckless and forgotten about it? Or was I being set up by the people I loved most? I pulled out my phone and dialed my oldest friend, Tom. "Can you come over?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Something's wrong. I need your help." As I waited for him to arrive, I replayed the morning in my head, searching for clues. Olivia's pattern was always the same charm. Guilt, pressure. But this time, it felt different. More calculated. More dangerous. When Tom arrived, I handed him the envelope. He read through the documents, his brow furrowing. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "You've always been careful with money. You don't even like casinos." I nodded, feeling a wave of relief. "I know, but look at the signatures. They look just like mine." Tom studied the papers, then looked up at me. "You need to call lawyer? And the police?" "This is serious." Tom's words echoed in my mind long after he left. I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope still open in front of me. Olivia's voice replaying in my head, her pleading, her insistence, the way she'd looked at me like I was already guilty. I tried to remember the last time I'd felt truly at ease around her. Maybe it was years ago, before Ethan, before the kids, before the money troubles started creeping into every conversation. Now, every word felt like a negotiation, every visit a transaction. I wondered if he even saw me as her father anymore, or just as a lifeline she could tug whenever she started to sink. I picked up the phone and dialed the number from my bank. The hold music was tinny and relentless, a soundtrack for the anxiety building in my chest. When a representative finally answered, I explained the situation as calmly as I could. "I think someone stole my identity," I said, my voice barely steady. "There are debts in my name I never took out." The woman on the other end was polite but distant, reading from a script. She promised to flag my accounts, to send me forms, to start an investigation. But her voice told me what I already knew. This was going to be a long, uphill. I hung up and stared at the stack of papers again. The signatures were perfect. The details were all correct. But I knew, with a certainty that went deeper than memory, that I hadn't done this. I tried to picture Olivia sitting at my desk, rifling through my files, copying my signature over and over until she got it just right. The image made my stomach turn. Was it possible? Could my own daughter really do something like this? Or was I just being paranoid, seeing betrayal where there was only desperation? The house was too quiet. I wandered from room to room looking for anything that would make this all make sense. In the living room, I found a photo of Olivia as a child, grinning up at me from beneath a mop of tangled hair. I remembered the day we took that picture, how she'd begged me to let her climb the big oak tree in the backyard, how she'd laughed when she finally made it to the top. She'd always been fearless, always pushing boundaries. I wondered when that courage had turned into recklessness. The doorbell rang, jolting me out of my thoughts. I opened the door to find Olivia standing on the porch, her eyes red from crying. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me like she was searching for the right words. "Dad, I'm sorry," she finally whispered. I didn't want it to be like this. I stepped aside, letting her in. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands twisting in her lap. "I know you're angry. I know you don't believe me. But we're out of options. Ethan's business is failing. The creditors are calling every day. I thought maybe if you just paid for it, we could figure the rest out later." I sat across from her, the weight of her words pressing down on me. "Olivia, if you needed help, you could have asked. You didn't have to do this." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I tried, Dad. I really did. But every time I asked, you said things were tight, that you were saving for retirement, that you couldn't afford to bail us out again. I thought if you saw how bad it was, you have to help." I wanted to reach across the table, to comfort her the way I used to when she was little. But something held me back. "Did you forge my signature?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She looked away, her silence answered enough. "I'm sorry," she said again, her voice breaking. "I just wanted to protect my family." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and unspoken. I realized then that this wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about the invisible lines we draw between ourselves and the people we love. Olivia had crossed that line, and I didn't know if we could ever go back. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I called the police, filed a report, and started the long process of untangling the mess Olivia had made. She stayed for a while, sitting quietly at the table, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. When she finally left, the house felt emptier than ever. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every decision, every moment that had led us here. I wondered if there was something I could have done differently, some way to have stopped this before it started. But the truth was, I didn't know. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. For a moment, I hoped it was all a bad dream, that I'd open my eyes and find Olivia in the kitchen, making pancakes with the kids, laughing about some silly surprise. But the ache in my chest told me otherwise. I reached for the phone, half expecting another call from the bank or the police, but it was Tom. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice gentle. I hesitated, not sure how to answer. "I don't know," I admitted. "I feel like I'm living someone else's life." Tom offered to come by, and I agreed, grateful for the company. While I waited, I wandered through the house, noticing things I'd never paid attention to before: the stack of unopened mail on the counter, the faint smell of Olivia's perfume lingering in the hallway, the echo of her laughter in the empty rooms. Everything felt different now, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next blow to fall. When Tom arrived, he brought coffee and a box of donuts, just like he used to when we were kids. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Olivia had handed me the envelope, and I told him everything, every detail, every doubt, every fear. He listened without interrupting, his face growing more serious with each word. "You did the right thing," he said when I finished. "You had to protect yourself. And Olivia, she made her choices." I nodded, but the words fell hollow. "She's still my daughter," I said quietly. "I keep thinking about when she was little, how she used to run to me when she was scared, how she'd curl up in my lap and fall asleep. I never thought we'd end up here." Tom reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You can't blame yourself for her decisions. You did everything you could." We spent the rest of the morning going through the paperwork, trying to piece together what had happened. The more we looked, the clearer it became that Olivia and Ethan had been planning this for months. There were emails, text messages, even notes scribbled in the margins of old bills, reminders to ask Dad about the loan, to get his signature on the forms. It was all there, hidden in plain sight. As the hours passed, anger began to replace the sadness. I thought about all the times I'd helped Olivia and Ethan paying their rent when Ethan lost his job, covering the kids' school fees and lending them money for car repairs. I'd always told myself it was what family did, that you helped each other no matter what. But now, I wondered if I'd just been enabling them, making it easier for them to take advantage of me. By noon, I'd made a decision. I called my lawyer, explained the situation, and asked for advice. He was blunt. "You need to protect your assets," he said. "Freeze your accounts, change your passwords, and don't sign anything without talking to me first. And if Olivia or Ethan contact you again, refer them to me." The words stung, but I knew he was right. I couldn't afford to be naive anymore. That afternoon, I drove to the police station to follow up on my report. The officer I spoke with was sympathetic but realistic. "These cases are tough," she said. "Family fraud is more common than you'd think. But it's hard to prove unless you have clear evidence. Keep everything: emails, texts, voicemails. And if they threaten you, call us right away." I left the station feeling both relieved and defeated. I wanted justice, but I also wanted my family back. I wanted to believe that Olivia was still the little girl who used to pick dandelions in the yard, not the woman who'd forged my name, nearly ruined my life. But as I drove home, I realized that some things, once broken, can't be fixed. That evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset behind the trees. The neighborhood was quiet. The only sound was the distant bark of a dog and the hum of a lawnmower down the street. I thought about calling Olivia, about trying to talk things through, but I knew it was too soon. The wounds were still too fresh, the trust too shattered. Instead, I called my sister, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. We talked for hours, reminiscing about our childhood, about the parents we'd lost, about the families we'd built and the mistakes we'd made. She listened as I told her about Olivia, about the debt, about the betrayal. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "You're not alone," she finally said. "We'll get through this together." As the stars came out, I felt a small measure of peace. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I knew I didn't have to walk it alone. The days that followed blurred together, each one marked by a new phone call, a new letter, a new reminder of just how deep the damage ran. The bank froze my accounts as a precaution, and I spent hours on hold with credit agencies, explaining the situation over and over. Each time I recited the story, it felt a little less real, as if I were describing someone else's nightmare. But every time I hung up, reality came crashing back. My daughter had forged my name, and my life was unraveling because of it. I started keeping a notebook, writing down every detail I could remember. The dates of Olivia's visits, the things she'd said, the time she'd asked for money or help. I combed through old emails and text messages, looking for patterns, for clues I'd missed. It was all there, in black and white, the slow, steady erosion of trust. The way small requests have grown into bigger ones, the subtle manipulation that had become so routine, I'd stopped noticing it. I realized I'd been blind, not because I was foolish, but because I wanted to believe the best about my own child. Tom checked in every day, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes just sitting with me in silence. He never pushed, never judged. He just listened, letting me talk when I needed to and letting the quiet fill the spaces when I didn't. I found myself telling him things I'd never said out loud before about my fears, my regrets, the guilt that gnawed at me every time I thought about Olivia as a little girl. "You did what any parent would do," he said one afternoon, his voice steady. "You loved her. That's not a crime. But love, I was learning, wasn't always enough." The police called to update me on the case. They'd spoken to Olivia and Ethan, who denied everything. "It's his debt," Olivia insisted. "He's just embarrassed." The officer told me not to contact them directly, to let the investigation run its course. I agreed, but the silence was suffocating. I missed my grandchildren. I missed the sound of Olivia's voice when she wasn't asking for something. I missed the family I thought I had got. My lawyer worked quickly, filing paperwork to protect my assets and advising me on every step. He was methodical, almost cold, but I appreciated his clarity. "This is about survival now," he said. "You have to think like someone who's been targeted, not like a father." It was a hard shift to make, but I forced myself to do it. I changed the locks on my house, set up new passwords, and started carrying my important documents with me everywhere I went. One evening, as I was sorting through a box of old photographs, I found a picture of Olivia on her 10th birthday. She was blowing out candles, her face lit up with pure joy. I stared at the photo for a long time, trying to reconcile that little girl with the woman who'd betrayed me. I wondered if she felt any guilt, any regret, or if she convinced herself that what she'd done was justified. I wanted to believe she was still in there somewhere, buried beneath the fear and desperation. The next day I got a call from Ethan. His voice was tight, almost angry. "You need to drop this, old man," he said. "You're tearing the family apart. Olivia's a wreck. The kids are asking questions. Just pay the debt and let us move on." I felt a surge of anger, sharper than anything I'd felt in years. "You did this," I said, my voice low. "You and Olivia. I'm not paying for your mistakes." He hung up without another word. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the conversation, wondering if there was something I could have said to make him understand, to make him see the damage he'd done. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't have mattered. People like Ethan didn't care about consequences. They cared about getting what they wanted, no matter the cost. The following morning, I met with my lawyer in person. He laid out the next steps: restraining orders, civil suits, the possibility of pressing criminal charges. It all sounded so final, so irreversible. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" he asked. I hesitated, thinking about Olivia, about the grandchildren I might never see again. But then I thought about the fear, the betrayal, the way my life had been turned upside down. "I don't have a choice," I said. "I have to protect myself." As I left his office, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time since Olivia handed me that envelope, I felt like I was taking control. The road ahead would be long and painful, but at least I was moving forward. The days stretched into weeks, each one a test of patience and resolve. I learned to live with the constant hum of anxiety, the way my heart would race every time the phone rang or a letter arrived in the mail. My world had shrunk to the size of my living room, my lawyer's office, and the police station. I stopped going to the grocery store during busy hours, afraid I'd run into Olivia or Ethan or, worse, the kids. I missed them more than I could say, but I knew I couldn't let my guard down now. Tom remained my anchor. He came by every few days, sometimes with a casserole, sometimes with a six-pack, always with a listening ear. We talked about everything and nothing, old fishing trips, the Cubs' latest losing streak, the weather. But beneath it all was an unspoken understanding things would never be the same. "You're doing the right thing," he reminded me one evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the trees. "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved." I tried to keep busy. I cleaned out the garage, sorted through boxes of old tools and forgotten memories. I found letters from Olivia's childhood, drawings she'd made in kindergarten, Mother's Day cards she'd written for her mom. Each one was a tiny dagger, a reminder of what I'd lost. I wondered if she ever thought about those days, if she missed the way things used to be. Or if she was too far gone, lost in a maze of debt and desperation. The investigation dragged on. The police collected evidence, interviewed witnesses, and pored over financial records. My lawyer kept me updated, but progress was slow. "These cases take time," he said. "Family fraud is complicated. People lie. They cover for each other. But we'll get there." I tried to be patient, but every day felt like a lifetime. I wanted closure, but more than that, I wanted answers. I wanted to know why Olivia had done it, why she'd chosen Ethan over me, why she risked everything for a quick fix. One afternoon, I got a call from the detective handling my case. "We found some inconsistencies," she said. There were emails between Olivia and Ethan discussing the debt, the forged documents, even plans to move if things went south. "It's enough to press charges, but I wanted to check with you first." My hands shook as I listened. The finality of it all hit me like a punch to the gut. "Do it," I said, my voice barely steady. "They need to be held accountable." The next few days were a whirlwind. The police arrested Olivia and Ethan, charging them with fraud, forgery, and identity theft. The news spread quickly. Neighbors whispered. Friends called to offer support or condolences. I felt exposed, like my entire life was on display for the world to judge. But beneath the embarrassment was a sense of vindication. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined it. The truth was finally out. The hardest part was seeing Olivia in handcuffs, her face pale and drawn, her eyes full of something I couldn't quite name. Regret? Shame? Or just fear? She didn't look at me as they led her away. I wanted to reach out to tell her I still loved her, that I wished things could be different. But the words caught in my throat. Some things I realized were beyond forgiveness. After the arrest, the house felt emptier than ever. I wandered from room to room, haunted by memories of better days. I missed Olivia's laughter, the sound of the kids running through the halls, the chaos of family dinners. But I also felt a strange sense of peace. The worst was over. The truth was out. Now, all that was left was to pick up the pieces and start again. Tom came by that evening, bringing a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. We sat on the porch, watching the stars come out, saying nothing. Sometimes, silence says more than words ever could. The days after Olivia's arrest were a strange mix of relief and grief. I'd spent so long waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the truth to come out, that when it finally did, I felt hollow. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, and every sound seemed to echo off the walls. I found myself listening to the laughter of my grandchildren, the clatter of Olivia's keys in the door, the familiar rhythm of a family that no longer existed. I tried to keep moving forward. My lover called with updates on court dates, paperwork, and the slow grind of the legal system. "You'll need to testify," he said. "It won't be easy, but it's important." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I knew he was right. If I wanted to protect myself, to make sure this never happened again, I had to see it through the end. The first court appearance was surreal. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom, my hands folded in my lap, my heart pounding in my chest. Olivia and Ethan arrived with their attorney, looking tired and defeated. Olivia wouldn't meet my eyes. Ethan glared at me, his jaw clenched. The hearing was brief, just a reading of the charges, a setting of bail, but it felt like a lifetime. When it was over, I walked out into the sunlight, feeling both lighter and heavier at the same time. The weeks that followed were filled with paperwork and phone calls. I met with the prosecutor, who explained the process in careful detail. "We have a strong case," she said. "The evidence is clear. But family cases are always complicated. Be prepared for anything." I nodded, trying to steel myself for what was to come. I started seeing a therapist, something I never thought I'd do. At first, I felt foolish, sitting in a stranger's office talking about my feelings. But over time, it helped. I talked about Olivia, about the betrayal, about the guilt that still gnawed at me. "You can love someone and still hold them accountable," a therapist said. "You can grieve what you've lost and still protect yourself." The words stuck with me, echoing in my mind. Long after each session ended, Tom remained by my side, a constant presence in a world that felt increasingly uncertain. We spent long evenings on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. He never pushed, never judged. He just listened, offering comfort in the form of quiet companionship. I didn't realize how much I needed it until one night, as we watched the fireflies dance in the yard. I found myself laughing for the first time in weeks. The trial date approached, and with it, a sense of finality. I gathered my evidence, emails, texts, bank statements, and forged documents. I rehearsed my testimony, going over every detail until I could recite it in my sleep. The night before the trial, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what Olivia was thinking, if she regretted what she'd done, if she missed me the way I missed her. The morning of the trial, I dressed carefully, choosing a suit I hadn't worn in years. I wanted to look strong, composed, and unbreakable. But as I sat in the witness box, facing Olivia and Ethan, I felt anything but. I told the truth, every painful detail, my voice steady, even as my hands trembled. Olivia stared at the floor, her face unreadable. Ethan glared at me, defiant to the end. When it was over, I stepped outside, the weight of the past few months pressing down on me. The verdict wouldn't come for days, maybe weeks, but I felt a sense of closure. I'd done what I could. The rest was out of my hands. That night, I sat on the porch with Tom, watching the stars. For the first time in a long time, I felt hope. A small, fragile thing, but hope nonetheless. Maybe, just maybe, I could start to heal. The days after the trial crawled by, each one heavy with anticipation. I tried to distract myself with chores, mowing the lawn, fixing the leaky faucet in the bathroom, organizing the garage, but my mind always drifted back to the courtroom, to Olivia's downcast eyes and Ethan's cold stare. I wondered what they were thinking, if they blamed me for what had happened, or if they finally understood the consequences of their choices. I wondered if Olivia missed me, if she missed the life we'd had before everything fell apart. Tom kept me company, sensing that the waiting was the hardest part. He brought over old movies, cooked dinner, and made sure I got out of the house at least once a day. We went for walks in the park, sat on benches watching the world go by, and talked about everything except the trial. It was a relief to lose myself in the ordinary, to remember that life went on, even when it felt like mine had stopped. One afternoon, as we walked along the river, Tom turned to me. "You know, you're stronger than you think," he said. "Most people would have given up. But you stood up for yourself. You did what you had to do." I shrugged, not sure I believed him. "I just did what anyone would do," I said. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would have pressed charges against their own child. Not everyone would have risked losing their family to do the right thing. The verdict came on a rainy Thursday. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the gray sky, when my phone rang. It was my lawyer. They were found guilty, he said. Fraud, forgery, identity theft. The judge was clear there's no excuse for what they did. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Justice had been served, but at what cost? My family was broken, maybe beyond repair. The sentencing hearing was brief. Olivia and Ethan were given probation, community service, and ordered to pay restitution. The judge spoke directly to Olivia, her voice stern but not unkind. You betrayed your father's trust, she said. You have a long road ahead if you want to rebuild that trust. Olivia nodded, tears streaming on her face. For the first time, I saw real remorse in her eyes. I wanted to reach out to tell her I forgave her, but the words wouldn't come. Some wounds were too deep to heal with a simple apology. After the hearing, Olivia approached me in the hallway. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her actions. Dad, I'm so sorry, she whispered. I don't expect you to forgive me. I want you to know I never meant to hurt you. I looked at her, searching for the little girl I used to know. For a moment, I saw her, just a flash, a memory, but then it was gone. I hope you find your way, I said quietly. But I need time. The weeks that followed were a time of slow rebuilding. I focused on myself, on healing, on finding a new sense of normal. I started volunteering at the local food bank, helping people who were struggling in ways I now understood all too well. I reconnected with old friends, spent more time with my sister, and even started going to a book club at the library. Each small step felt like a victory, a reminder that life could go on. Tom was there through it all, steady and unwavering. We celebrated the little things, a good meal, a sunny day, a laugh shared over an old joke. I realized that family wasn't just about blood. It was about the people who stood by you when everything else fell apart. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Tom raised his glass. To new beginnings, he said. I smiled, feeling the truth of his words settle in my chest. The past would always be a part of me, but it didn't have to define me. I could choose what came next. As summer fades into fall, I found myself settling into a new rhythm. The routines I'd once taken for granted, for morning coffee on the porch, reading the paper, tending the garden, became small acts of reclaiming my life. The house, which had felt so empty after Olivia and Ethan's betrayal, slowly began to feel like home again. I painted the guest room, replaced the curtains, and filled the kitchen with the smell of fresh bread and simmering soup. Each change was a quiet declaration. I am still here. I am still standing. The legal aftermath lingered, of course. Olivia and Ethan made their restitution payments, small checks arriving each month with their names scrolled in the corner. At first, I couldn't bring myself to cash them. It felt wrong, like accepting payment for something that could never truly be repaid. But my lawyer insisted. It's not about the money, he said. It's about accountability. So I deposited the checks, each one a reminder of the line that had been crossed, and the slow, painful process of making things right. I saw Olivia only once in those early months. She came by the house on a gray afternoon, standing awkwardly on the porch with her hands stuffed in her pocket. She looked older, thinner, her eyes shadowed with regret. I just wanted to see you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I have no right to ask, but maybe someday we could talk? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. There was so much I wanted to say: anger, sadness, love, disappointment, but the words tangled in my throat. She left without coming inside, and I watched her walk down the driveway, her shoulders hunched against the wind. Tom encouraged me to keep moving forward. You can't change the past, he said, but you can decide what you do with today. I took his advice to heart. I started volunteering more, finding purpose and helping others. I met people with stories far more painful than mine, families torn apart by addiction, illness, poverty. Their resilience inspired me, reminded me that healing was possible. Even after the deepest wounds, I also began to forgive myself for not seeing the signs sooner, for wanting to believe the best in Lydia, even when the evidence said otherwise, for loving her so much that I lost sight of my own boundaries. My therapist helped me understand that forgiveness is not about excusing what had happened, but about letting go of the anger that threatened to consume me. You can love her and still protect yourself, she said. You can grieve and still move forward. The seasons changed. And with them, so did I. I found joy in small things, a good book, a walk in the park, a phone call from my sister. I learned to trust myself again, to listen to my instincts, to set boundaries without guilt. I realized that while Olivia's betrayal had changed me, it hadn't destroyed me. I was still capable of love, of hope, of hoping. Over one crisp October morning, I stood in the backyard watching the leaves fall from the old oak tree. I thought about Olivia, about the little girl she'd once been, about the woman she was now. I didn't know if we'd ever be close again, but I hoped she would find her own path to healing. I hoped, in time, we could build something new, something honest, something real. As the sun rose higher, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The past would always be a part of my story, but it didn't have to be the end. There was still so much life left to live, so many moments waiting to be claimed. Our winter arrived quietly, blanketing the neighborhood in a hush that made every sound seem sharper, every memory more vivid. I found myself reflecting on the year behind me, the pain and the lessons, the losses and the unexpected gifts. The holidays were the hardest. I decorated the house out of habit, stringing lights along the porch and setting out the old ceramic nativity Olivia had painted as a child. The silence was different this year, less like an absence, more like a space I could fill with whatever I chose. Tom invited me to his family's Christmas dinner. At first, I hesitated, not wanting to intrude, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. "Your family," he said simply, and I had realized how true that had become. His grandkids called me uncle, and his wife made sure there was an extra slice of pie just for me. The laughter around the table was genuine, the warmth real. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of belonging that wasn't tangled up in guilt or regret. Olivia sent a card on Christmas Eve. The handwriting was careful, the message brief. "Thinking of you. I hope you're well. I'm sorry for everything." I read it twice, then set it on the mantel beside the other cards. I didn't know if I was ready to respond, but I was grateful she'd reached out. It was a start, however small. The new year brought a sense of renewal. I made resolutions, not the kind you write down and forget, but quiet promises to myself. I would keep volunteering. I would keep seeing my therapist. I would keep saying yes to new experiences, even when they scared me. I would let myself hope, even if it hurt. One afternoon, January, I ran into Ethan at the grocery store. He looked older too, his face drawn, his eyes wary. We stood in the produce aisle, surrounded by the ordinary bustle of shoppers, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I know I can't undo what happened," he said. "But I'm trying to make things right. For Olivia. For the kids." I nodded, unsure what to say. There was no apology, but there was something like humility in his voice. I wished him well and walked away, feeling lighter than I expected. The months passed, each one a little easier than the last. I started a new project, building birdhouses for the community garden. The work was simple, satisfying, a way to keep my hands busy and my mind at peace. I made friends with the other volunteers, shared stories and laughter, and found comfort in the rhythm of shared purpose. Olivia called in early spring. Her voice was tentative, uncertain. "Dad, I know I have no right to ask, but could we meet for coffee?" My heart pounded, but I agreed. We met at a small cafe on the edge of town, the kind of place we used to go when she was a teenager. She looked nervous, but determined. "I'm in therapy," she said. "I'm working, paying restitution. I know it's not enough, but I want to try. I want to be better." We talked for an hour about everything and nothing. There were no grand gestures, no promises of forgiveness. Just two people, trying to find their way back to each other, one conversation at a time. When we parted, I felt a cautious hope. Maybe, with time we could rebuild something, not what we'd lost, but something new. As winter melted into spring, I realized I was no longer waiting for life to return to what it had been. I was living it, day by day, with all its mésalliances and beauty. The past was still there, but it no longer defined me. I was free to choose what came next. Spring brought with it a sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. The world outside my window seemed to wake up all at once. Buds on the trees, birdsong in the mornings, neighbors out walking their dogs and waving as they passed. I found myself smiling more, letting the sunlight in, opening the windows to let the fresh air sweep through the house. The heaviness that had settled over me during the long winter began to lift, replaced by something lighter, more hopeful. Lydia and I met for coffee again, this time at her suggestion. She arrived early, waiting at a corner table with 2 mugs already steaming. She looked better, healthier, more at ease, though there was still a shadow in her eyes. We talked about small things at first, her job at the bookstore, the new apartment she'd found, the way her kids were adjusting to the changes. She didn't ask for anything, didn't make excuses. She just listened, nodding as I told her about my volunteer work, about Tom, about the birdhouses I'd started building for the community garden. After a while, she reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly. "Dad, I know I can't fix what I did. I know I hurt you. But I want to try to be a better daughter. I want you in my life if you'll have me." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything we'd been through. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just the woman who'd betrayed me, but the daughter I'd loved since the day she was born. I squeezed her hand, feeling the old ache in my chest soften. "Let's take it one day at a time," I said. "That's all either of us can do." We started meeting regularly, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for walks in the park. The conversations were awkward at first, full of stops and starts, but gradually they became easier. We talked about the past, about the choices we'd made, about the pain and the lessons learned. There were tears, but there was laughter too, real, unguarded laughter that reminded me of the little girl who used to chase fireflies in the backyard. Cheered me on from the sidelines, always ready with a word of encouragement or a gentle nudge when I started to doubt myself. "You're doing the hard work," he said. "You're showing her what it means to forgive, even if you can't forget." I realized he was right. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing to move forward, to let love have the last word. As the weeks passed, I found myself looking forward to my meetings with Olivia. We started making plans for small things, like going to the farmer's market or visiting the art fair downtown. She invited me to her apartment for dinner, and I accepted, nervous but hopeful. The meal was simple, but the conversation was easy. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like a family again. The restitution checks kept coming, and each one felt less like a reminder of betrayal and more like a symbol of accountability, of the work Olivia was doing to make things right. I cashed them without hesitation, using the money to support the community garden, to buy books for the local library, and to help others who were struggling. It felt good to turn something painful into something positive. By the time summer arrived, I realized I was no longer defined by what had happened to me. I was defined by how I'd chosen to respond, by the boundaries I'd set, the forgiveness I'd offered, the life I'd rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. Olivia and I were still a work in progress, but we were moving forward, one day at a time. Summer's warmth settled over the town, and with it came a sense of renewal I hadn't dared hope for. The garden behind my house has tomatoes ripening on the vine, sunflowers stretching toward the sky, bees drifting lazily from bloom to bloom. I spent my mornings there, hands in the dirt, feeling the simple satisfaction of nurturing something and watching it grow. It was a quiet reminder that healing, like gardening, took patience and care. Olivia visited more often now. Sometimes she brought her children, who would race through the yard, their laughter echoing off defense. The first time they came, I felt a pang of uncertainty. Would they remember me, or would I just be a stranger in their lives? But children are resilient. They hug me without hesitation, eager to show me their latest drawings, to help me water the plants, to ask endless questions about the world. Their presence filled the house with a joy I thought I'd lost forever. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch sipping lemonade, Olivia turned to me. "Dad, I know I can never undo what happened. But I want you to know how grateful I am that you gave me another chance." Her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered with emotion. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "We can't change the past," I said, "but we can decide what we do with today. I'm proud of you for facing what you did, for making things right." We talked about forgiveness, about the ways we'd both changed. She told me about her therapy, about the support group she joined, about the friends she'd made who understood what it meant to start over. I shared my own journey of how I'd learned to set boundaries, to ask for help, to let go of the guilt that had weighed me down for so long. We laughed about old memories, cried over the hard ones, and found comfort in the simple act of being together. Tom remained a constant in my life, his friendship a steady anchor through every storm. He joined us for barbecues, helped the kids build a treehouse, and never missed an opportunity to remind me how far I'd come. "You're living proof that it's never too late to start again," he said one evening as we watched the fireflies flicker in the dusk. I smiled, feeling the truth of his words settle deep in my bones. As the weeks passed, I found myself looking forward to each new day. I volunteered at the food bank, mentored a young man who reminded me of myself at that age, and even took a short trip to the coast with Tom, a chance to see the ocean, to breathe in the salt air, to remember that the world was still full of beauty and possibility. Olivia's restitution payments eventually ended, but our relationship continued to grow. We celebrated birthdays and holidays, shared meals and stories, and built new traditions that belonged to us alone. There were still hard days, moments when the past threatened to overshadow the present, but we faced them together with honesty and grace. One evening, as the sun set behind the garden, Olivia and I sat side by side, watching her children chase fireflies across the lawn. She leaned her head on my shoulder, a gesture so familiar it brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, "for everything." I wrapped my arm around her, holding her close. "Thank you for coming back," I said softly. "That's all I ever wanted." Looking back, I realized that the greatest surprise Olivia ever gave me wasn't the envelope of the debt, but the chance to rediscover hope, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond between a parent and child. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was ours, messy, complicated, and, in the end, full of love. If this story moved you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if someone you loved betrayed your trust? How would you find your way back? Your story matters too. Thank you for watching, and remember, no matter how dark things get, there's always a way forward. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and never stop believing in second chances.